right, welcome everyone. This is Our Travel Experiences. I'm your host, Kyle Rasmussen, and today I have with me Donna. Donna, how are you today?
I'm great, Kyle. Thanks for having me.
Good, glad to hear it. I'm really excited to hear about your travel experiences. I know you just got back from a really amazing trip, so I'm really excited to hear about that and hear about some of the other amazing things that you've done over the years.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I just got back from Nepal, so that was my latest adventure. And it really started out as kind of a joke between my husband and I. He jokingly was going to go buy me jewelry at the store, and I said, "Oh no, don't spend money on that. Send me to Nepal." And I said that, and then I immediately thought, where did that come from? Because I hadn't even thought about going to Nepal.
Mm-hmm.
But then and as I was thinking, where did that come from? He said, "Okay, book your trip." So I was suddenly going to Nepal, and originally as a mountain biking trip. And then we added a trek to Everest Base Camp onto that as well.
Okay. Yeah, really cool.
Yeah.
I was just watching this, I think his name is Nims Purja. Listening to him he was on a podcast recently, and then he was climbing Everest and all those mountains. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So you went to base camp at Everest. What was that like?
Yeah. Well, Everest Base Camp itself is pretty much a big rock in the middle of a big glacial pile of rocks. There's just rocks everywhere. There were a few tents at base camp, but the climbing season is primarily in May. And so most of the active climbing was not occurring. There was, I think, just one team trying to do a fall ascent, but it's not very common. I don't even know if it's ever been actually done.
Oh, wow.
And of course, Everest Base Camp is at 17,600 feet. So it was plenty high. And you don't stay there long. You basically go to Everest Base Camp, and then you're there at that elevation for 20 minutes or a half an hour. Everybody takes pictures and celebrates, and then you leave and drop in elevation a little bit, because we're just not built to be that high for very long. So, but it was quite an experience to go there and see that place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, while you were up there, were you feeling the effects of, lack of oxygen and that sort of thing?
I didn't get altitude sickness until the night after we went to base camp, and then I got a little bit sick, but it wasn't too bad at all. We kind of all noticed a little bit of some minor altitude sickness, and it's usually things like you just lose your appetite. And that sort of thing. But we were all on Diamox, which is the altitude medication, and I think that really was beneficial. The other folks that we met along the way that weren't on it, I think they were suffering more than we were. But we were all we were feeling great. It's like the whole group was healthy and happy, and we just had a great trek. So. Yeah.
How long was the trek up to base camp?
So the trek itself, once you leave Lukla, which is this little village, and then head up to base camp and back, is 10 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
But you have to fly to Lukla. There's no roads to Lukla. It's remarkable where they don't put the roads up there. Anyway, you have to fly to Lukla. It's one of the most dangerous airports in the world. So
why is that?
Very short runway. I've heard that it's a 1,700 foot long runway, and
not very much.
and you go, and it's got a 12% uphill grade. So when you land at the bottom, you have to hit the runway right at the bottom, and then the 12% grade helps slow the planes down.
Gosh.
Okay, but we actually never made it onto a plane. They can only fly to Lukla when they have good visibility. They can't fly instruments into Lukla. So we ended up we were in Kathmandu, and no one had been able to fly to Lukla because of weather for many days, like 3 or 4 days. So we were at the airport, our flight got canceled. And then we just sat there and went, let's take a helicopter. So we hired a helicopter, and we actually flew by helicopter under the clouds.
Oh, wow.
And into Lukla. So that was the start of the 10 days, was getting to Lukla. Might have been one of the biggest adventures, was us getting in a low flying helicopter.
Oh, wow.
But then from there, we met up with our porters. We had our guide with us, and the adventure began, and we started trekking. So it was actually, it took about 7 days to reach Everest Base Camp. And then coming back, you're going a lot faster going back.
Yeah.
So you only take 3 days back. But then we got stuck again at Lukla because we couldn't get a flight out. So we ended up getting on another helicopter and flying back to Kathmandu.
Oh, wow.
So they use helicopters up there. They're like taxi services almost, because of how mountainous the regions are, and there's very few roads into those areas. So there's a lot of opportunities for helicopter rides up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. How many miles in total was it up to base camp?
I think total is like 60, but they actually measure, they don't measure in miles or even kilometers. They estimate how many hours so you'll see a sign that'll say, the next town, and they'll say it's 3 hours away instead of how many miles or kilometers it is.
So, that's interesting.
Yeah, it was very interesting, but there's so much up and down. There's very little level hiking on this trek, and it's very steep up and very steep down. So to try to measure it linearly with a kilometer or a mile, it would be really difficult.
Yeah.
So they just do time, and they were pretty close. So yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you originally went because it was a mountain biking trip,
yeah,
correct? Okay.
Yeah.
So did you go mountain biking while you were there?
Yeah, I did. Okay. Yeah, we went mountain biking. So what happened is I had three friends, women from Yakima, that went to do Everest Base Camp, but none of them wanted to stay for the mountain biking side. So they flew home eventually after we were done with Everest Base Camp, and another friend flew over because he wasn't going to do the hiking. So he and I went mountain biking in a completely different area of Nepal. And so, we spent about 12 days mountain biking. And again, we had a guide, and we were not carrying all of our equipment. So it was just really fun and very much different, like geographically, from Everest Base Camp, from that area. So it was a whole different experience to do that. The trekking part of the trip, those little towns are pretty much built to support the tourist industry. So that's kind of the experience we had when we were going to Everest Base Camp. Where we were mountain biking, though, these were actual towns where people live. They've got agriculture. They're mostly Tibetan villages where we were. So very culturally rich, in mostly Buddhism, but some Hinduism as well. We went to lots of ancient monasteries and that kind of thing. So it's very culturally enriching. Whereas the Everest Base Camp side was pretty much, you get up every morning and you're hiking for 6 or 8 hours. You eat and you go to bed. There's not a lot of time for other things. So it's very different.
Okay. So with the biking trip, what all do you do? Are you just mountain biking just to see the scenery, and you stop at monasteries or different places like that?
Yeah. So we had a guide with us who, of course, he was Nepalese, so he did most of our communicating. There was some English speaking people, but it was kind of broken English. But there's a route that we were on that he was familiar with, and so we just traveled from village to village every day, and then sometimes we would ride to a village just to have tea at one of the places and that kind of thing. So that was, and sometimes we would roll into these little villages where all the people were basically not at the village; they were out in their fields working. And so he would find somebody who would sit down, who would make tea for us, and they'd bring it out from their house. But it was just. It was just really quite an experience. Or we would see little kids who were so fascinated by our bicycles, and then they wanted to have their pictures taken with our bicycles because we had really cool bicycles. So,
now, did you bring your own bicycle over there?
Yeah, I did bring my own bike over there. I do have a case for it. So basically, when you fly with bikes, you have to Yeah, you have to box it up and protect it. Most airlines will let you take those on as carry-on luggage, or not carry-on. Sorry, not.
Say.
I'll start that over. Most airlines will let you take your bicycle on as part of your checked baggage, and some of them have fees for it. But the airline that I flew on, there was no extra fee for weight or oversized or anything. So I pack it in a box, and then they just load it on the plane, and it comes off the plane at the other end.
Huh.
And then I had a bike shop in Kathmandu that put it all back together again.
Okay.
Made it. I don't trust myself to do that.
Yeah. So you have to break it all down.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And actually, I have a shop here in town that did that for me. Okay. So yeah.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah. What other gear did you have to bring with you on that trip?
So for the biking side, of course, shoes, helmet, everything. All the cycling clothing. So basically, I think I brought about 4 pairs of biking shorts and tried to wear things for several days in a row. And then a sleeping bag and my SteriPen for sterilizing water.
Wow. Always a good thing.
You can buy bottled water, but I kind of want to avoid doing that when I can, just because of the plastics. Because everything that, like on Everest Base Camp, there's no roads. Everything that is brought up to those tea houses where you stay come up on someone's back, a person's back, or there's a lot of pack trains with cows, yaks, donkeys, horses, and all of that. Yeah. So it's not like it's easy for them to get that there. And and the area that we were mountain biking in did have a few more roads, but still it's dealing with the plastic waste and that kind of thing. So I tried to sterilize as much as I could of the water that was brought into the tea houses. Just on the tap, I would just try to sterilize that.
Yeah, so that's always good. I just got back from Morocco, and I think we all got sick while we were there. I think it was something we ate. I think they must have used probably some bad water in the meal that they cooked. Yeah. But yeah, that was not a fun experience. It's always good to sterilize because you never know.
Yeah, we were really lucky because nobody got sick on our trip. We were very careful, and they warn you, especially on the Everest Base Camp side, that beyond a certain town, you don't eat any of the meat because there's no refrigeration, and so if it's been killed somewhere else and then carried up the trail on the back of a horse or a cow, they can't really guarantee that it's going to be safe for you to eat. And then plus, once you get into the national park there to go to Everest Base Camp, they don't allow anything to be killed. So you legally you can't swat a fly, even of thing. It's that life is that honored in that area, and so. Again, then the meat has to be killed outside the park boundaries and then packed in. So you pretty much go vegetarian for the duration of the trip, which is fine. It was actually, the food was delicious, so didn't mind not having meat.
Yeah. Was there someone that cooked you guys a meal every day, or?
Yeah, so you move every day. You're hiking or biking to a new town, and you stay in these places called tea houses. And basically they're pretty nice. They've got a main room that is heated by a stove in the middle, using either firewood, or they sometimes burn yak dung that they dry. It's very interesting, the process they use, but they don't let anything go to waste. So the yaks are critical. They feed them, they use them as pack animals, they use them as a meat source. They make wool out of them, and then they use their dung they dry it, put it in little patties and dry it, and then they burn it through the winter. So, so anyway, there's these rooms with these little stoves, and there's tables, and they're very festive rooms. And then the bedrooms themselves are not heated, and they're down little hallways, and so they can be kind of cold at night. So that's the tea house lifestyle. So in each tea house, there's a pretty full kitchen, and they make a menu. They have a full menu of options of foods you can have. We ate a lot of things like dal bhat, which is a lentil soup and rice. It was actually developed in Nepal. So we had a lot of that and a lot of different kinds of soups. We really wanted to make sure the food that we were eating had been boiled.
Yeah.
That was part of the strategies to not get sick.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we didn't eat a lot of fresh salads or anything like that.
Yeah. Smart.
Yeah.
What was the weather like there?
On the Everest Base Camp part of the trip, it was foggy, rainy, windy, snowy, sunny. It was like the full menu of weather options on that trip, So sometimes we could see the mountains and some days we couldn't, which was a little disappointing, but at the same time, the rest of the travel was so fascinating, the communities and the ground level stuff, that we didn't really miss the mountains all that much because there was so much to see under the clouds, kind of.
Yeah.
It was really remarkable to see the villages and lifestyles of the people. It was great.
Yeah. What was it like getting to Everest Base Camp and just being there?
We were all feeling really proud of ourselves for having accomplished that. All of us had to prep and train for this. We had a couple of our members of our team were actually trail runners, so they carried a lot of fitness into the trip. I, on the other hand, was, I'm an old ex mountain biker kind of person, old ex bike racer, and I hadn't hiked for years, and so we all had to really prep. So once we actually did it and got there, we all had this enormous sense of accomplishment and relief that we had been successful. Mm-hmm. So that was one thing I really remember. And then it was also great because we were there with people that we had met along the way. So you kind of, as you're trekking, you kind of are moving at the same pace as other people from all over the world. Like we met a group from Singapore, men from Singapore. Wow. We were there at the same time, another group from India that was there. And so you knew these people, you'd spent time on the trail with them. And so it was like a big celebration with more than just your group. Mm-hmm. So that was pretty awesome. But the hiking itself for me was harder than I expected. A lot of, especially the last probably mile into base camp, we were scrambling over rocks and trying not to fall in lakes and trying not to get hurt. So it was quite an experience. I would recommend it for anyone.
Yeah, I know, it sounds amazing. I definitely want to try that at some point. And I'm sure that's an accomplishment that not a lot of people can say that they've done either.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's pretty amazing.
It's definitely going to be like one of the big things in my life, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. So have gone there.
Yeah. Yep. Was there any permits or visas you had to get in order to do that?
Yeah. So first of all, to enter Nepal, you have to get a visa. Okay. Very simple to do. You can do it right at the airport. There's some forms for you to fill out. Show them your passport. At the time we went, they were requiring proof of vaccination for COVID. So we had to carry our little cards with us, or a printout that you had been vaccinated. And so that was what we needed to get into the country. And then for the trek into Everest Base Camp, there was a permit to enter the national park, which is Sagarmatha National Park. And really that involved just the guide took care of all of that. He had we handed him our passports. He went up to the window and got the permits, and that was all we really needed to do. And then there was a few checkpoints along the way to make sure that they hadn't lost anybody along the way, So, but he took care of all of that.
Yeah, so that's good.
Yeah.
What about for the mountain biking? Did you have to have a permit to do that?
On the particular route that we were taking, we did not need to get permits. There are some areas close to where we were, though, that you have to get a special permit to go into, but we're going to do that next year.
Yeah. You got some stuff planned already?
Oh, yeah. I got a few things going on. Yeah, I'm going to do a trip to Vietnam in January.
Oh, wow.
Because I have a friend who I met on another biking trip who's 81 years old, and she is still mountain biking and
Wow.
still like running half marathons. She's like my idol. But she really wanted to go and do a trip to Vietnam. And so I said, okay, I'll go. So we're going to take a couple of weeks and go cycling in Vietnam in January.
Wow.
Yeah. Then I'm going to go to Moab, Utah in May. And that's just kind of my annual thing I do because I love cycling there.
Yeah. So you just did that with my mom earlier this year.
Yes. I talked your mother into going on a mountain bike trip and she did awesome.
I know she loved it. But what were your thoughts on that trip?
Oh gosh. So we did a trip into the Bears Ears National Monument area, and it was with a touring group that I've traveled with a lot. And it was really funny because this was not planned, but our tour group involved like 7 people from Yakima that we all just happened to coincidentally be on the same tour together. So that was really fun. But we rode probably 20 to 30 miles a day, and most of it was not technical riding, but we were on gravel roads and Jeep trails and that sort of thing. We had a great hike into an area where there was cliff dwellings from the ancient times. Oh, wow. And that was a great hike. We went in and had lunch on the cliffs and just, enjoyed the moment out there. So that was fun. It was a pretty high elevation for Utah. I think we were about 8,000 or 9,000 feet. Oh, wow. So we've all felt the elevation a little bit, but it was just really, really fun and great scenery and a lot of great people on the trip. Yeah. I'm
sure that's a really good way, mountain biking, to see an area, to explore, because you can obviously cover more ground than if you're walking, and you can maybe go places where you can't driving. So I feel like that's probably a good way to experience some maybe lesser known spots or less visited spots.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. Like I've done Canyonlands quite a few times. That's a great place to go by mountain bike. You can get out of the touristy areas of Canyonlands, and you're considered a vehicle on the roads. So you can ride all the roads down into the canyons and all of that stuff. So it's a great way to see Canyonlands. And that's what I'm going to do in May again, is go back into Canyonlands.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Where else have you gone mountain biking around the world?
So most of my mountain biking has been in the United States. With bike racing, I traveled a lot, but it was into more urban areas. So a lot in the United States, Oregon, Idaho, Utah, Colorado, most of the western states, basically.
Good mountain biking areas.
Yes, absolutely.
So you're a professional bike racer, is that right?
Well, I was a masters racer, so I had I did compete with professional women domestically who were like half my age, but I felt like I needed to do that to be able to go to world championships and be successful there. So I never technically had a pro license to race, but I ended up racing against those women who were my kids, younger than my kids, I guess.
How'd you stack up against them?
I actually did okay. I think I shocked a few of them. I even got on the podium at a few races.
Wow.
So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
What what were those races like, and where did you go for those races?
Okay, so I was a sprinter. So a lot of people might be familiar with, if you've watched cycling on the Olympic Games, there's a velodrome, which is an oval track, and there's a sprint event where 2 or 3 people sprint against each other, and it's kind of a cat and mouse game, and then somebody takes off and dead at speed, and the sprint starts. So that's what I actually did, was that kind of sprinting. So I actually won 5 national championships and then a world championship. So, and set a world record. So I was successful in that for my age, and it was age group stuff, for my age group.
What was the world record?
I set the world record in the 500 meter in a 500-meter standing start sprint. And then someone broke it like 2 weeks later, So I think I was the first 50-plus woman who had gone 500 meters in under 40 seconds. And it was, and then after that, it was like somebody had broken that barrier, and then several women then did it. It's kind of like the 4-minute mile, I guess. Mm-hmm. So my world record lasted not very long. But that's cool why you set them. You set a record like that because that you want the sport to improve, and so you set that record, and you should expect that someone should break that because if no one does, then your sport isn't improving at all.
Yeah, so, definitely.
Yeah.
What was the training like for that?
Oh gosh, so. As soon as I decided to become a world champion, that's how the thought process went. One day I just went, my kids have moved out. I'm no longer supporting them in bike racing, so I'm going to go win a world championship. and so from there, I called one of my son's ex-coaches and just said, will you take on the overweight mother of an ex-bike racer? And he knew me. We had worked together for years, and he said, absolutely. So from then it was a lot of, training 7 days a week, basically with some recovery times and that kind of thing, but staying focused. And I trained for, I think, 6 or 7 years before I actually won the world championship. So it was a lot of weight training because as a power athlete, you have to train to have as much wattage as you can. So a lot of time in the weight room, a lot of time on the bike. It was pretty all-consuming for a few years. I don't know how my husband stood it.
Where all did you travel through that?
Oh gosh, a lot of places in the United States. I think I've ridden just about every velodrome in the U.S.
Wow.
And Canada. I've been there, and then I went to Australia, New Zealand. England. I guess those are the 3 foreign tracks I went to. So, yeah.
Was there any, I guess, other than the world champion, becoming a world champion, was there any like real highlights traveling to these places or any struggles traveling?
I guess when you travel as a bike racer like that, you don't have much time to become a tourist at all. You basically fly to the city, go to your hotel, locate where you're going to get your food at for the few days you're there, go to the track, train, race, and then you're just back and forth, hotel, food, track, food, hotel for a couple of days, and then you leave. So it's not a glamorous lifestyle in any means. And probably the biggest challenge for me was when I would fly overseas, dealing with jet lag, and you would have to get off the plane and you're immediately got to be in go mode to race. And you don't have any time to get your clock reset or anything like that. That was probably the biggest challenge.
Yeah, that's one thing I've always wondered about, seeing these athletes travel all over the world for different sporting events. How can you consistently perform at that level when you're going across 7-8 time zones?
Yeah,
it's got to be rough.
Yeah, I can guarantee it is.
There's probably a whole training around that too, I would think.
Yeah. Well, I do know several years ago, there was a women's pursuit team on the track, and they actually relocated to Europe before the London Games, and they were there for several months.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think that was one of the benefits to them. They ended up getting a silver medal, so they did really good. And I think not having to deal with the time change probably was part of that.
Yeah, yeah. Going back to the world records, I feel like I just saw not too long ago there was some lady who broke a major record. Did you see anything about that?
I don't. I didn't. If it was. I kind of lost track of the news while I was gone. Okay. So if it was during that month I was gone.
It might have been, I feel like maybe a month ago, or within the last, 4 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, that was probably when I was overseas, and we didn't get any news or anything. which was kind of nice, actually.
Yeah.
The world just went on around us and we didn't know what was going on. Yeah. So that was good.
That's one of my favorite parts about traveling is you're so in the moment, and obviously you're not going to always going to have access to a TV or a radio or, any way to get some sort of news.
Yeah.
You're just focused on what you're doing. And I think that's really, really fun and needed for people to do sometimes.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it was, for me, I became more mindful of the moments that I was in and where I was at, when I wasn't distracted by my phone and needing to keep up with the latest news. So it was good.
Yeah. Is there any other trips that you've been on, whether mountain biking or not, that have really stood out to you?
So I think for me, I had the fortunate experience of also getting to travel with my mother when she was in her 80s.
Wow.
And we took 4 pretty big trips. So she was about 84 or 85. And all of a sudden she just piped up with, I want to travel. And my dad looked at her and said, well, where do you want to go? And she had her list. I mean, it was her bucket list. And so he looked at me and said, can you take your mother on these trips? And I said, okay, I can do that. And so, yeah, we went to Europe on a couple of river cruises. We went to Norway. She wanted to see the fjords of Norway. And then we went to China and spent 3 weeks in China because she wanted to see the Great Wall of China. And these were things that she had wanted to do since 3rd grade.
Wow.
And so that travel was especially meaningful just because I got to do that with my mother. And then now she's recently passed away, but that still will just always remember those trips. And those were great.
Yeah. I'm sure that's some amazing memories and getting to see her kind of live out her dreams too.
Yeah. It was very awesome.
Yeah. Is there any places you wouldn't necessarily want to go back to, or struggles, or just bad experiences?
Let me think.
I think it's always important to talk about that side too, because travel doesn't always go as planned.
Yeah, I've also been to Thailand a few times because my daughter lives there.
Wow.
And so one of the things I guess I've learned because of traveling there and visiting Bangkok, because she lives in Bangkok, and also even Kathmandu and then being in China, I don't really enjoy big Asian cities because the traffic is just scary to me. It's terrifying, and I actually rode a little scooter in Bangkok one time, and I could hear my ex-coaches, this was after I was done racing, and I could hear his voice in my head going, just drive the bike, Smith, drive the bike. And I was terrified on my little scooter, zipping in and out of, the traffic and taxis and all that. That was scary. So, I guess Asian cities in general, I'm not too excited about.
Yeah. I remember when I was in Jakarta, Indonesia, same thing. I was so terrified going through traffic there because there's no lines or anything. Like, people just go wherever and you hope you don't hit each other.
Yeah. And I think, but the driver attitudes are very different. I noticed that in Kathmandu, they are it's real crowded and there's really no rules like we have traffic laws, but at the same time, everybody is just making their way through life and they don't want to cause a fuss. They don't want to cause any harm to anyone. So they're really actually quite patient too with all the chaos going around them, so I did notice that on this trip more than I noticed it when I was in Bangkok, just how different the attitude is about, who owns the road and all that stuff that we kind of get into here. But
I'm sure they, that's their normal life. So they get used to it.
Yeah. But they're just, they'll just pedestrians, they just walk out in the road and wander through the traffic and, people stop for them and there's no crosswalks, goodness sakes, so, but everybody just kind of makes their way.
Yeah, definitely. Well, what's on your bucket list or trips coming up?
Oh gosh. Well, bucket list is definitely back to Nepal in the fall. I'm getting involved with a couple of the other ladies that were on the trip too. We're getting involved with helping one of the local schools there.
Oh, wow.
Most of the people in the small villages are subsistence farmers and don't have a lot of money. And their school systems, they actually have to pay for school to send their kids to school. So I'm getting involved with hopefully fundraising a little bit so that one of the schools, actually it was one of our guides lives there. So we have this personal connection. And getting involved with raising some money so they can have a better educational experience for some of the kids. And also to try to get more girls into the classroom, because most families, because they're so poor, what financial resources they have, they send their boys to school and not their girls. And there's a direct connection between girls not going to school and then being trafficked. And so we're trying to reduce that risk to some of the girls by getting them into the classrooms. And so we're working with them now with the school in Nepal as a start. I kind of feel like I was called to go there, and maybe this is my why. When you retire, you're kind of always like, well, what am I going to do now? And maybe this is what my thing is. I don't know. So back to Nepal, we're going to do another big mountain bike trip and some more trekking, and then plus go to the school and see the school. And then I'm probably going to go to Iceland at some point. Ooh. I would like to bike in Iceland.
Yeah.
And by then, at my age, I might be using an e-bike at that point, but I'd love to go to Iceland. So I see that in the next couple of years. And then also a trip to Patagonia in South America.
Oh, yeah.
There's some areas there that I want to explore. So those are kind of the big things right now. Yeah.
Yeah, those all sound amazing.
Yeah.
I just spent 24 hours in Iceland not too long ago.
Yeah.
Definitely a great place for biking.
Yeah.
From what I saw.
Yeah.
I'd love to go around, because you can go around the whole country.
Yeah. The ring road.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. That's on my list. So.
Yeah, that looks amazing.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. Donna, anything else that you want to share with the listeners?
Well, I guess my advice to listeners is if you've got a bucket list, start getting to those things and don't wait,
Yeah.
And my inspirational speech would be that you have to, when you have an idea to do something, figure out how to do it and don't talk or think about why you shouldn't do it. Just get on with it and do it. Because when we started talking about this, it was hiring a trainer, but we just defined what needed to be done to do it, not made reasons to not do it. And I think that that's just the way you have to approach things, is just, what is it? Nike had that saying, just do it. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally
plan
agree
and do
that.
it. Yeah.
Just find a way to make it happen.
Yeah. Because I had some health problems. I wouldn't say problems, kind of conditions of aging, like, really bad back, some eye things. And so when we started preparing for this, I went to my doctors and said, hey, I want to do this. Is that going to work for me? And they counseled me on how to work, and how to make it happen. And that's the first step, is just figure out how to do it. Not, I can't do it because my back is, injured, or I have bad eyes or whatever. Just say, no, let's figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
And that's just always been my mindset from when I said, I think I'll go be a world champion bike racer, and then it's like, now I have to figure out how I'm going to put my money where my mouth is there.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, so no excuses. Just go do it.
That's a great attitude to have.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time to share your experiences. I know I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. It was fun. My new experience with this now is I've never done a podcast before. So,
there you go.
So that's great.
If there's some sort of world championship for podcasters, I'm sure you can do it now. Well, yeah, thanks again. I appreciate the time and look forward to seeing you somewhere around the world soon.
All right. Well, thank you. This was a lot of fun.
Yep, no problem. Bye, everyone. Hey everybody, Kyle here. If you enjoyed today's show and want more, you can always check out every episode on Spotify, Anchor, YouTube, and now Amazon Music as well. Just search for Our Travel Experiences on any of those platforms and it will pop up. You can also find everything all in one place on my website, ourtravelexp.com. And if you want to see my travel pictures as well as travel pictures from guests on the show, you can check them out on Instagram. The page is called Our Travel Experiences Podcast. And if you want to share your own pictures on the Instagram page or be a guest on the podcast, you can message me via that Instagram page or email me at ourtravelexperiences@outlook.com. I would love to see your pictures and hear about your travel experiences, so please send them my way. And if that isn't enough for you, make sure to check out my weekly YouTube show, From Around the World Fridays. Every Friday, I'm taking 5 to 10 minutes to answer questions from listeners, share some souvenirs that I bought over the years, share my postcards over the years that I've accumulated, or share videos and pictures from one particular city or country that I visited, and so much more. So check it out, guys. You won't be disappointed. And make sure you go subscribe to that as well. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you somewhere around the world soon.